in the book of Judges, there is a tremendous point to be made, and it is the point of availability. Can I hear you say availability? God, through the book of Judges, doesn't use people who probably would be marketable in today's modern day choices. He uses people who are just ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And sometimes God doesn't use people who we would choose. He doesn't use people who we would think he would want to use, but he uses who he chooses. I don't hear nobody talking to me. And what I found out is that you can be less, but God can use your less and turn it into best. Watch God in the book of Judges. I will not be long. I'll be through just as soon as I get finished. Herein lies the point of the text. He uses Othniel, that's a judge. He has about 12 judges. 8 of them actually were judges, but 12 of them are named as rulers or leaders of that day. He uses Othniel and uses him because of his courage. He's a descendant or transcendent or descendant, whichever you prefer, of Caleb. And he has courage. He's not a person who would really be one who would be chosen by men, but he was chosen by God. He uses another by the name of Ehud. Ehud is one, he's a left-handed man in a right-handed world. I don't hear nobody talking to me. In that day and time, to be left-handed was almost typical to being handicapped. And as God uses Ehud, it's an example to all of us that have inferiority complexes about our physical abilities or our lack of this or our lack of that. Man, God can make up the difference in the lack that's in your life. And don't you sit up here and let nobody sitting next to you make you feel inferior. We give too much power to external forces. I don't hear nobody talking. And sometimes if you're not careful, you'll make other people feel much more powerful than they're supposed to be able to feel about your destiny. You can't get your sense of self-worth from external forces. You got to do like I did tonight. When I looked in the mirror and brushed my head backwards and looked in the mirror, I told God you knew what you were doing. My. This is a day and time you got to encourage yourself. I don't hear nobody talking to me. And you may not have what she has, and you may not have what he has, but you've got what God gave you. And I dare you to use what he gave you. Oh, the book of Judges is replete of examples of God using ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Look, he uses, after Ehud, he uses Shamgar. And Shamgar obviously is not a person who is all that equipped, but God uses him and takes a pole to defeat the enemy. That is, what is that you have in your hand? And perhaps you feel that what you have is not the biggest, not the baddest, not the greatest. But if you give it to God, you've got enough in your hand right now to obtain the victory. Well, you just touch somebody and say, you got it in your hand right now. Look at them and say, yes, you do. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. It's a trick of the enemy to make you feel like you're not enough and you don't have enough. God then uses some women. Oh, this is interesting to me because in that day and time, it's a man's world. No. Jane Brown, small imitation of it. God used a woman in a man's world. Here it was that these were times when men ruled and governed. But God used a woman by the name of Deborah. Do I have any Deborahs, sisters of Deborahs in here now? I said, any sisters of Deborah? That's why you can't sit here and let nobody judge you because you're a female and make you feel like God can't use you in certain areas of capacity. God chooses and God uses where, when, and however he pleases. You see, I learned something about women now. I learned something about women. I'm married to one for 30 years. And I found out if a woman asks you to do something, God has enabled women with a certain ability, a certain urge, a certain capacity, till they will submit to your leadership if you stay out in front. I don't hear nobody talking to me. You got to say up and out in front. See, submit means they got to come up under. And if you're not standing tall enough, there ain't nowhere for them to get up. I don't hear nobody talking. Now, what I found out is this, and you brothers tell me if I'm telling the truth. If your wife tell you, John, Joe, Ken, Bob, this room needs painting. This bedroom needs painting, and this other room needs painting. Now, what does he usually say, ladies? I get to it. I don't hear nobody talking to me. And eventually, a week passes. 2 weeks passes. But I'm going to tell you something. About the third week, that brother going to walk in that room and she going to have a rag around her head with a roller. Talking about, I told you this room needed. God had no man that stepped up to the plate, and so God took this woman by the name of Deborah, and you know the story. He took this woman by the name of Deborah, and he used her to do some mighty things. She had a husband. She had a husband named Lapido, and he about like his name sounds. But she also had the courage, and God used her as a prophetess to show the general of Israel's army what he must do. And the thing about it is, when God tells her to tell him, he's the general. He's the 4 or 5-star general. And Deborah says, the Lord spoke to my heart and told me to tell you this. And when she tells him this, what does this general say? He says, I'll go. You go with me. God uses women. You know, it's a terrible thing to be with a sorry man. I said a sorry man. God deliver us from sorry men. I don't like to see our young ladies so gullible, so I call them on a man hunt. Got to find a man. Got to find a man. Because some of them get so nervous and so anxious for a man, you got to figure out everything in britches is not a man. I don't hear nobody talking to me.